Alright everyone, we start off today talking about the polio case that actually was registered the other day in Rockland County in New York. This is a posh suburb. It's sort of on that comfy outer ring of the suburbs of New York City. So you've got the core city, and then you've got a huge amount of sprawl and bloat, generally around New York. Then you have sort of the inner suburban region, which looks Cleveland-esque. It's very dull and boring, and it'd probably be hell to live there. I think I'd rather live in fucking Yonkers or something. And then you get these outer suburbs that are, 25, 30 miles away. Rockland County, I think, is about 40 miles away. And there's been a polio case. This is the first U.S. polio case since 2013. It's been almost a decade. And it came from foreign shores. We know this because the individual had been given the oral vaccine. This indicates a likelihood. They're not identifying this person, and I think I know why. This is very likely someone who is not legally in the United States, number one, or is a migrant for other purposes, number two, because there are only 3 countries in the world where that vaccine is most prevalent, where they still have native cases: Nigeria, Afghanistan, and Pakistan. That wouldn't look very good for Joe Biden's immigration proposals now, would it? I have a feeling that higher powers in the CDC are quashing some information about this story. To be clear, this particular case could have been caused by the oral vaccine in that individual. There are 2 polio vaccines. There's the one that's used in the US, Europe, Japan, places like that. You can't get polio from it. It's completely safe. There's never, as far as I know, been a case of that. Then there's the oral vaccine, and the reason why this is used in certain parts of the world is actually because of vaccine hesitancy. People don't want to get injected, so they just give them the oral serum. It's a lot cheaper, it's easier to disperse to large numbers of people, and so we've been using that. Generally, it's fine. It imparts resistance to polio. I think they give 3 doses normally. On rare occasions, it can actually... The genetic code of the deactivated virus can come alive again. I'm not sure through what biochemical anomaly this happens, but it is capable of actually causing polio. It's capable of causing paralysis. The person begins shedding the reactivated virus. I argued years ago, I think in the context of an outbreak in Nigeria, if I remember correctly, that we should scrap the oral vaccine entirely and move to using the safer methodology, because there's no chance that this sort of breakthrough case happens. That's point number 1. Yes, it costs more. Yes, there will be people who are hesitant. A combination of that in coordination with sanitation efforts, proper food storage, drainage and so forth in these blighted areas of the world. Pakistan has areas that are extreme slums. Millions of people live in them. It's the same as leprosy in India. We can eradicate these diseases effectively now. There's no reason why polio should even exist in any human reservoir. Unfortunately, what I really worry about is this. I worry that when the New York branch of the CDC, or their medical complex there, tells people, hey, if you're in, Rockland County, we're doing tracing, and we're worried you might have come into contact with someone shedding active polio virus. Now, most of these people will already have been vaccinated in childhood. If they attended a public school, they had their course, they've got 99% resistance against polio, they're probably not going to get sick. That's the good news. The bad news is that more and more people are becoming hesitant to become vaccinated because of the piggishness of the government recently with regards to a certain other ailment that we won't mention because, of course, this video has to go on YouTube. The government used coercion and fear-mongering to try to convince people to get vaccinated. And it fell flat. Clearly, after the first shot, a significant proportion of the population was no longer interested. That may have become a side issue. My worry is that now millions and millions of people are hesitant to get other forms of vaccines. And my logic here is borne out by simple observation. Vaccine hesitancy 10 years ago effectively fell under 2 categories within the developed world. Hippies, that is, people who are far left separatists, love beads, meditation. If I just eat more quinoa and kale smoothies, I can't get sick anyway, so who cares? And extreme separatist survivalist groups, that is, people that want to operate on the very fringe of society off the grid. In other countries, like in Afghanistan and Pakistan, a lot of it is really distrust of the health complex by warlords and by zealots, religious zealots that want to keep people subservient. They don't see it as a problem. In some cases, there is a rejection of the basic premise of germ theory. It's not really a theory, it's proven, but people still call it that. I find it funny that there are some people bringing up terrain theory in the context of polio. It does kind of make sense. If you have sanitary surroundings with proper food storage, you'll have less of an animal reservoir for polio, because the rodent population will be kept to a minimum. The problem is that the contagion is still there. It's just going to interact with humans much less likely. It's much more infrequent. The problem is that you have no sanitary efforts in these countries. In sprawling urban areas around Lagos, that's a problem. Certainly in Afghanistan, out in the hinterlands, there are rodents. Food is not going to be properly stored. In Pakistan, Karachi, etc., outside of the inner city, you're going to get a lot of slums. In other nations, we've managed to snuff out polio in the human reservoir. In most of the developed world, you haven't really had polio cases except once in a blue moon for a very long time. But now you've got a new class of people who have been convinced to be hesitant to be vaccinated. And instead of just focusing on, hey, this vaccine will be perpetual, like flu or something, you're getting a vaccine every year. Instead of simply saying that's not necessary, I'm just not going to get it, I'm not afraid of influenza or honk honk, the similar virus that will not be named for the purposes of this video, they're throwing out the baby with the bathwater and they're not getting vaccinated for anything. So you're getting reservoirs of people who are getting measles now. And it's due to the government. It's not due to a handful of happy hippies that already were going to be unvaccinated to begin with. It's not due to some religious separatist group on the fringes of the Amish. It's not due to a handful of survivalists that come into town once every 6 months to resupply their ammunition and otherwise leave everyone alone. Now you've got a new class of people who are hesitant. Hipsters. Especially older millennial, young Gen X hipsters. They've got kids and they're not getting them vaccinated. It's become almost like a fashion statement among some of these individuals. Well, we believe in free-range parenting and organic living and not being vaccinated. Well, I agree with the first two. Free-range parenting is generally a good idea. If you're in a posh upper-middle-class suburb, it's safer than if you're in the inner city. I will note that there is some NIMBYism responsible for this. Organic, healthy living, growing your own food, canning and stuff, absolutely wonderful. Yes, you're getting better nutrition. And being properly nourished and in sanitary surroundings will limit your exposure to most diseases. That's not wrong. But it's almost like a rejection of the entirety of germ theory, again, loosely termed, and it makes no goddamn sense. This is also, Liz has told me this. Apparently there are some hipster, like upper middle class urban parents here in the Netherlands that also are not vaccinating their kids, and it's becoming worrisome. My worry is that there's really no way to address it without coercion, and I don't believe in that because I'm a libertarian. What are you supposed to do about it? The government caused the problem once again by being piggish and overbearing and by claiming that there was no debate to be had with regards to any medical practice that the CDC happened to put forward. They have convinced perhaps millions of Americans to be hesitant to follow guidelines that actually do make sense. Now, do I expect that this singular polio case, which came from abroad, presumably by someone who was illegally in the country or an asylum seeker or something, do I worry that this becomes a wider outbreak? Not particularly. Do I worry that in the future that could happen because of the slow march in that direction? Yeah, I worry a lot. And if polio breaks out, then all hell breaks loose. All of a sudden, you've got a bunch of little crippled kids around. Maybe, unfortunately, you get another fucking FDR. That's the last thing that we need at this particular juncture. We're already on the verge of a Great Depression anyway, thanks to Bidenomics. Can you imagine when the next bitter cripple comes along to throw people in concentration camps based on their ethnicity like FDR did? Or to sell oil to your enemies, allow that to be sold while bombing people. Link in the description. Archived, of course. Some of the stories have already parsed out the part about the oral vaccine being administered, and I'm going to tell you exactly why over the last 10 hours you've seen a shift in the coverage. Look at the articles from the first few hours when this broke, and then look at the articles from the last 2 or 3 hours. Virtually all of them omit the oral vaccine administration. Why? Because people online who know anything about polio have been pointing out that the oral vaccine would not have been administered to someone who was from the developed world. It had to have come from someone who was in the underdeveloped world and very likely caused that polio case. Whoops, it looks like someone got their administration, someone from a national from Nigeria, Afghanistan, whatever, possibly some other third world country, East Africa, India, someplace like that. And they got on a plane, and they did not wait for the full 30 days that you were presumably supposed to wait because you might end up getting polio. And then they had polio while they were in the United States. Now, they're no longer infective, and there is contact tracing going on, which should be supported. What I would tell you, if you're a clanker and you've come into contact with this, the polio vaccine is a little bit different than the honkening that we've seen over the last few years. The one that's administered in the West is actually safe. You should probably get it, but the problem is some people won't listen. They'll say, well, the government keeps trying to coerce me to get the jab of various sorts. I'm not getting it. And then they end up with fucking polio. And it'll be the government's fault, but ultimately they'll blame the far right, the conspiracy theorists. They'll blame content creators. The evil YouTubers caused a polio outbreak in Rockland Valley or something. Rockland County. That's who they'll blame. They'll blame hippies even. They'll even throw the progressives under the bus. This is worrisome. It's entirely self-inflicted by big government, as usual. They are the ones responsible for that prevailing notion among certain classes of the population. They have compacted an issue that really was not meaningful 10 years ago. There was no anti-vax movement 10 years ago. They have soundly revived it with their overbearing mentality and their overbearing attempt to literally destroy people's livelihoods if they did not participate in mainline medical procedures. This one being accepted for decades and decades, not causing any problems, therefore gets combined in the minds of some of these people with more recent, more contemporary practices. As usual, big government managing to take defeat from the jaws of victory. We've been on the precipice now for more than a decade of eradicating polio. And sanitation efforts, by the way, should continue in these countries. It's more difficult when you've handed Afghanistan to the Taliban. Thank you, Joe Biden. That was really cool. You can look forward to more polio cases there as well. That's about all. Peace out.